Mac Power Users, episode 676, Workflows with Kaitlin Salzke. Hello and welcome back to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett, and I'm joined as always by my friend and yours, Mr. David Sparks.
Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
I am good, David. I had a nice long weekend. Kids were out of school. We went hiking, and now I'm here with you.
Yeah, and we got new Macs today. Well, as we record it today.
Yeah. A bunch of announcements out of Apple today on the MacBook Pro and Mac Mini front, so that's always a fun way to start the day.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we're going to talk about that in more Power Users today, but that'll be fun. But I want to introduce our guest. Welcome to the show, Kaitlin Salzke.
Thanks very much for having me.
Kaitlin is an OmniFocus wizard. We talked to her in the MacSparky Labs, and she's got a great website over at Kaitlin Salzke, KaitlinSalzke.com, where she writes about automation and other nerdy things. But I think the reason, Kaitlin, you warmed the cockles of my heart is because you are a professional. You're an accountant, but you're also a nerd, and you're walking the line just like I did for so many years of doing the day job, but also putting out great content on the internet. And I just love what you're doing.
Thanks very much. I don't consider myself a content creator at all. It's more just and if you look at the regularity with which I post on my site, you will very much pick that up. But I do like to share what I come across, and as you said, I've had a lot of fun with the OmniFocus stuff over the last couple of years. So it's lots of fun.
Yeah, well, you're making great stuff, and the posts you put up are always worth reading. But tell us a little bit about you, Kaitlin.
I guess that's an all-encompassing question, isn't it? It's a hard one to answer. So I'm, as you said, I'm an accountant by trade. I'm actually working as the chief financial officer in our local government area over here in a small town in regional New South Wales in Australia. I have a 2-year-old who I've been wrangling all morning. So I was just saying to you guys just before we started recording, I hadn't heard that announcement about the new Macs yet. So that's very exciting. And as well as that, when I'm not doing those things, I'm studying a Bachelor of Computer Science as well, just on the side for something fun to do in all that spare time that I have.
Yeah, because being a CFO and a mom is, so
Not
boring
enough.
that you just went ahead and added a computer science degree to it.
Why not? Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, that you're a very impressive woman, Kaitlin, and the stuff you're doing is great. As you said, you do a lot of OmniFocus stuff, and you cover it on your website. One of the things you've done that I think is great is you've made some plugins for OmniFocus. And for folks who've been not paying attention to the OmniFocus thing lately, when Sal Soghoian left Apple, the Omni Group kind of snapped him up. And he has been working with them extensively as they've developed this Omni form of JavaScript, where you can write custom automations for their applications. I mean, they've done it for Omni Outliner and OmniFocus and OmniGraffle. And so in essence, people like Kaitlin and Sal are making new features for the app by writing scripts. And if you don't like what the app does, you can hopefully write it yourself or get someone to help you write it. And you can add these features. I mean, I think Sal's published over 100 at this point. But it's a really kind of fun community as you see a task manager kind of develop all these custom features. But Kaitlin is one of the big contributors there. And just tell us a little bit, Kaitlin, how did you get involved with that?
Gradually and accidentally. Sure. I've been using OmniFocus for a really long time. I think when I looked back, I think I started about 2014 or something like that. So I've used it through all sorts of different, seasons of my life, through study and travel and all sorts of different things. And what really prompted me to get started was I had a specific feature that I wanted OmniFocus to have that it didn't have. And I had a little bit of JavaScript knowledge, not a lot at all. And I happened to be away. I had a year overseas at the time, and there's only so many cathedrals and castles you can go exploring. So in my downtime, I started building an OmniFocus plugin to add, task dependency to OmniFocus. And I put it online and got some really good feedback, and then I kept thinking of more and more things that I wanted to be able to do, so I kept building them and just kind of never stopped, really.
Yeah. I love that because, I mean, it was like a kind of a hobby and it was a fun project and it got kind of legs of its own. And we're going to get into that deeply later about some of the stuff you've done. But before we do that, every Mac Power user needs to know, what kind of gear is this person using? What kind of Mac are you driving?
I feel a bit guilty because I've been listening to Mac Power users for a long time, and I always listen, and I'm always a little bit, or always have historically been a little bit envious of all the guests who have the newest, latest gear, because I've been running on really outdated old stuff for a really long time. But I feel a bit guilty because most of it's been updated recently in the last couple of years, so I'm no longer doing that. So at the moment I'm running, I've got a 13-inch M1 MacBook Air, which I got just over nearly a year and a half ago now, I guess, which I love, and it is a substantial upgrade to what I had before. So my previous Mac was a late 2012 iMac, which I got in 2014. So that really lasted me a long time. I was ready to replace it back in 2019 when I got back from overseas, and I think it was actually a Mac Power user's tip from the podcast or the forums, I don't remember, but someone suggested running an external solid state drive with the operating system on that rather than running it on the internal storage, and that got me another good couple of years out of it. So
that sounds like something Stephen would say. That's probably
probably,
yeah.
So thank you, Stephen, or whoever gave me that tip. You saved me a couple of years. But in the end, it got to a point where I don't think I could upgrade it past High Sierra from memory. And well, I mean, OmniFocus 4 is not going to run on High Sierra, so that really was the the deciding factor for me.
But that computer didn't reach end of life for you, right?
No, it didn't. So I had it sitting on my desk for a long time, and if I was less of a cheapskate, I probably would have bought something like a Mac Mini. But instead, since I had this lying around, I was running Home Assistant on it in the background, with a few little home automation kind of things, which was lots of fun to tinker with. And I had it running, Hazel rules and Keyboard Maestro macros and stuff in the background. So I guess the thing I'd say from that is that you don't need to necessarily have the latest and greatest to be doing some of these things. It can be an old snail's pace sort of 2012 iMac sitting on a desk uncomfortably somewhere. I haven't actually got it set up at the moment because we moved, and we don't have a dedicated office, so it was looking a bit ugly sitting on the desk, and it's in a cupboard at the moment. But
it's a little bit harder to stash an iMac somewhere than like a Mac Mini, running this stuff. Like a Mac Mini you can put in a closet, or mine is under my TV. But you have an iMac, it's just like, hey, there's an iMac in this room, right? Kind of demands attention.
Well, it kind of sat behind the screen. I had my regular monitor screen, and that was the same size, so it kind of sat behind that on my desk. So it wasn't too bad. And then I just used what I used to access it. I think I used Jump Desktop actually, just to remote into it from the one in front, so that I didn't have to move around, and rather than having a whole separate keyboard and mouse and everything set up, I did it that way, and that worked. Okay, it's not necessarily the setup I'd recommend someone go out and purchase, but if that's what you've got lying around, it did work.
Yeah, but for checking Hazel rules and running Home Assistant, it's going to be fine. I mean,
exactly.
Those aren't graphics heavy apps. Stephen, have you gone down the Home Assistant rabbit hole yet?
Not yet. It's kind of floating out there,
Oh man,
in my task manager.
That's a whole
without
conversation. I am so far down. Because I have tinnitus. Whenever I leave the refrigerator door open, I don't know, because the little alarm is the exact frequency that I can't hear.
Hang on, you can see the refrigerator door though.
Yeah, but I really can't if I'm in the next room.
Okay, so you left it open and you walked away.
Okay,
it's
the way it is. If you close it, sometimes it doesn't close all the way, it's like open like an inch. But But now I've got Home Assistant. It waits several minutes, and then it turns the lights in my studio red. It's like I've got a whole system now, so my wife doesn't get mad at me for leaving the refrigerator door open. But Home Assistant does stuff like that. It's pretty cool. Anyway, That's a rabbit hole. We'll put a pin in that one. Yeah, you said you have an extra screen. So do you use your laptop as a desktop as well?
Yeah, I do. So I really liked the iMac form factor, and that worked really well for me. But then I had a small human that runs around the house, and I found that having something that I can drag around with me is works a little better these days. And it's easier to travel with, and it's a bit easier to lounge around on the couch or whatever.
That's the thing with kids, right? When they first start walking, you're like, hooray, they're walking. And then like 2 months later, you're like, oh no, they're walking.
Oh no, they're running. Yeah.
What about on the mobile front?
Mobile front, I've got an iPhone 14 Pro, one of the purple ones, which I really enjoy. That's another space where I want a very slow upgrade cycle there as well. We did have a couple of upgrades in quick succession. We do I think the typical Mac Power users thing where you sort of hand off to the partner and you get the upgrade every couple of years. So I've upgraded the last couple of years because I've gone through. I literally went from an iPhone 4 to a 7 to a 12 and now to a 14. So we got to a point again. The small human being the impetus for the change, in that we wanted better cameras, really, because that's what we're using to take photos every day. And my partner in particular, he didn't have enough storage space, so we had live photos turned off, which I think live photos are absolutely amazing,
especially with kids.
Yeah, with kids. I said, no, we've got to upgrade because I want those on.
Yeah,
I want those on. So we did that recently, and I also have a separate work phone, and I asked for an iPhone there, of course, as well. And so that's an iPhone 11. I think they got me, but that works just fine. It's I'm not using it for photos or anything like that.
Yeah, if anybody listening has small children in their life, children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, those live photos, because those kids are so cute, like in those little 3-4 second videos. It's I hear from listeners who are like, live photos is dumb, it uses too much space. I'm like, you don't have any kids in your life, because if you did, you'd know they are amazing for that.
Yeah, they're fabulous. They're so fun to look back on. And I just recently learnt somewhere too that you can actually turn them into, if you've got a whole series of live photos in a row, which I wouldn't be guilty of taking 300 photos within the space of 20 seconds at all. But just hypothetically, if I were, that you can actually combine those into a video, I believe, in the Photos app, which I haven't played around with, but I have to experiment with that as well, because it's that thing of, I took a bunch of photos, but I really wish I'd got that in a little movie to play with as well. So, do
you know how to do that? That's news to me too. I didn't know that was possible.
Maybe I might have misread it because I haven't actually played with it, but I think there is a feature in. I think it's just in the menu in the Photos app someone was talking about, because they were saying it was visible. I think it was maybe in the Mac Power Users forums, actually. They were saying it was visible sometimes, but not always. And they were trying to work out what the parameters were. So I was intending to go and play with that. So I'm sorry if I've just lied to everyone and it's not actually a feature that exists. But
we'll follow up on it. And we have a feedback show every 2 or 3 months, so we'll explain.
Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Great. I'll wait for you to do that groundwork, and then I'll go in and dig into it. Then that'll save me some time. Thanks, guys.
The other thing I was thinking, Kaitlin, is we booked this quite a while ago. You coming on the show, and it seems to me like you've got a lot of new gear recently. Is this because you're coming on the show? Is that why you bought all the new stuff?
No, I wish would have been a good excuse. No, I mean, I bought the M1. I actually bought in August 2020, and the iPhone I got it when it came out, so it feels newish. But it's not brand new. It's just new to me for someone that doesn't upgrade for 7 years at a time.
How about the iPad? Are you on the iPad?
I have an iPad, and it's an older one. It's a 12.9 inch iPad Pro, and I think it was the second generation. It's sort of. And this is a bit shameful to admit on this podcast, but it's sort of sitting a bit dusty on a shelf at the moment. I had it when I first got it. I used it all the time, mostly for really wasting time watching Netflix and things like that. But it and when I was overseas, I was using it basically as my primary computing device. I had an old MacBook Air, 2011 MacBook Air, I think it was, but that was quite slow, and so I used the iPad for most of the stuff I was doing over there. But really, these days, I really just use it for a couple of things. I'm a flute player, so I've been using it for sheet music on Fourscore, which I know I've heard you mention in the past, David, which is just wonderful. I'm not actually doing that much music since I've moved, and again, there's a few other demands on my time at the moment.
Sure,
but that's a really great app that I use all the time. And we pull it out when my partner's kids come and visit, and we play Sketch Party on the Apple TV, which is a good use. But that's really all it's getting used for at the moment. So I need to I think see what else. I'm thinking about using it, maybe taking it into work so I can make better use of OmniFocus there or something like that. But I need to spend some time figuring out how that fits in.
Yeah, that's a real use for you. I've talked on this show about how I've turned my 12.9 into like a status board on my desk, and that's working with a Mac. But if you were working with a PC, it would almost be even better for some of your Mac software like OmniFocus to be able to have it there with that iPad, especially if it's just gathering dust. Why not? One of the tricks of that is that you just leave the screen on. You don't have it turn off automatically, but you just have to remember to push the button when you leave the desk. But you should definitely play with that. And then for sheet music, what is your app of choice for that?
I was using Fourscore. I don't know if there are any other apps, to be honest. I mean, it's such a.
You could technically use any PDF app, but Fourscore is like the app for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was to managing page turns and things. I know my partner's actually a professional musician and a music teacher, and he when I first started, he's like, "Oh yeah, but how are you going to manage the page turns and things?" And it's funny in the end, as long as everything goes smoothly, it typically works better than an actual physical page turn, because you can do half turns and you can do all sorts of things. If you really want to be a proper Mac Power user, you could probably get a pedal and change it that way, but it's not really necessary with a flute, because you usually get a break to breathe somewhere anyway.
Yeah, and those Bluetooth pedals are super cheap now. I mean, they used to be quite expensive, but now I think you can get them for like $30 or $40 to stick under the piano, or as a saxophone player, the pedal is actually really nice, because it's a lot more work to turn a page when you're playing with your fingers on the horn. But anyway, I think that's a rabbit hole that almost nobody listening cares about. Steven's just groaning.
No, it's fine.
And those that do probably already know that Fourscore is the way to go anyway. So
yeah.
Anything else in the hardware category? What about the Apple Watch? Where does that fit in?
I've got an Apple Watch. I got it a few years ago. I got really into running, which is something that is entirely unexpected for me, as a lifelong nerd and person who is averse to any kind of exercise whatsoever. But I actually think it's a really good hobby, a really good exercise for nerds. If you haven't tried it, I'd highly recommend it. I say that completely hypocritically, because I haven't run since I had my son. But there's so many stats you can track and apps you can use. It's a really good way to trick yourself into exercising, I think. And so I got it sort of as a bit of a reward to myself when I got to a certain point with that. I can't remember even what the target was, but I got that, and I used it to have live stats and tracking and all of that kind of thing through Smash Run, which is a really good web service that just does running stats, which is, I can't believe I'm even ending up there. But the way I got into it actually was there's an app, I don't know if you guys have come across it at all, but it's called Zombies Run.
Yeah,
and again,
I'm familiar.
Right up the nerd kind of alley, and it's like I guess an audio story. And basically the premise is that it's a zombie apocalypse, and you're a runner for this township that's survived this apocalypse, and you have to run out and get supplies and not get attacked by zombies, and at random intervals you get chased by zombies and you have to speed up or they'll catch you, kind of thing. It sounds completely ridiculous, and it kind of is, but it's the good kind of ridiculous, I think. And they have a sort of a couch to 5K kind of app as well, which is how I got started. And it's lots of fun. I'd recommend you give it a shot if it's something that is interesting to you.
You also had a pro tip for the Apple Watch with babies, right?
Oh, I did, yeah. And again, I feel like I'm just repeating all the good tips I've heard from elsewhere on MPU. But this is a bit of a time-limited one. But for a certain amount of time, until they work it out, if you put your Apple Watch in water mode, your baby can tap on it to their heart's content, and they won't accidentally send messages or, call emergency services or do any of those fun things. They can tap away and you can still know what the time is happily without having that interference, because they're attracted to the shiny gadgets quite badly. But I found that was one tip that I picked up from someone in the community, I'm sure, that was quite helpful, and it still sometimes works, although he's mostly worked out how to disable that at this point, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, there's also some nice accessibility features where you can lock the devices into one app. So like if there is like a child's app, because they, the first thing they figure out is how to, get to Springboard.
Right.
But you enable that accessibility mode and you turn it on, and then they're stuck in the app.
Yeah, guided access is if you have a kid and you don't know about guided access, you need to find out about it. Even just for FaceTiming, I found that like trying to FaceTime family and friends, because we live away from most of them, and they just want to poke at the screen, and there's a big red button on it that's the hang up button, and that's the one that he wants to press all the time. So I've actually set up a focus mode, because I found it quite difficult. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I found it quite difficult to actually do the triple tap gesture to like the button to get into guided access mode when I'm in a FaceTime call. I always end up just turning the screen off. So I actually just set up a focus mode so that whenever I change into that focus mode, it just automatically enables guided access. And so that seems to have worked around that problem, and also puts my watch into water mode as well. So that seems to have worked around that problem reasonably well. But yeah, no, guided access is great.
That's really ingenious. I find triple tapping sometimes hard too. It's like you have to get the rhythm right, or you're right. It just turns the screen off. And
when you're trying to talk to someone and the screen keeps going off, it just does. It's the worst time to be trying to work it out. The other option that I've also experimented with is an old iPhone 6S that my partner had lying around, just leaving that as a dedicated device that doesn't have anything on it that he can break. So that's the other solution, but it still has messages, and I still live in perpetual fear of him calling 000 or
emergency services.
Emergency services.
It's like he pushes the one button to dial in the satellite, and a helicopter comes to your house.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't have to explain that, especially as you work in government. It's like, oh, sorry, y'all.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Text Expander. I just recently paid my renewal on Text Expander, and man, do I love this application. We all spend time behind a keyboard, and we frequently find ourselves typing the same thing more than once. And you know that nagging feeling when you do that? You're like, I did this before. Why am I doing this again? Well, Text Expander solves that problem for you. It's the text expansion tool for Mac Power users because it's got a bunch of power features in it. Text Expander doesn't just do text replacement. It also does things like enter the current date and time, or enter AppleScript code, or hit special characters like the tab key or the return key. It also has a great fill-in feature. That fill-in feature saves my life so many times. I do a lot of customer support. A lot of the customer support email I've automated with Text Expander snippets, and it automatically fills in the name with an AppleScript. And then if there's a special issue, I can handle it with a fill-in field. I mean, I've tried hiring people to do some of this stuff for me, and it's frankly faster for me to just handle it with Text Expander. When I was a lawyer, I had to write a lot of interrogatories, which are just fancy legal questions, but you have to get the text exactly right. Well, Text Expander solved that for me, and I always got it exactly right, because automation not only makes you faster, it also makes you more accurate. People ask me how to get started with automation, and I always answer Text Expander because we all do typing, and automating that can save you time right now. And with Text Expander, you know how much time you're saving because they send you reports that show you how much time you saved by using Text Expander snippets. And every year, I save days of my life just having Text Expander handle typing for me. You should really try this app out. Go to textexpander.com/MPU and you can sign up and get 20% off your first year. They've got versions for Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, iPad, so you're covered all the way across. That link one more time, textexpander.com/MPU. Go check it out. Let them know you heard about it from us and get 20% off. And thanks, Text Expander, for all of your support of the Mac Power users.
Okay, so we want to get to OmniFocus and its plugin system. I'm not an active OmniFocus user. I keep up with it through David and through the show, and have followed with great interest as they go through this period of time with the JavaScript automation, everything that they're doing. And I kind of want to start kind of with the basics of how this JavaScript automation interacts with the app and the data, and what all is possible with that.
So the answer is pretty much anything is possible. In terms of running automations, running plugins, there's a whole bunch of ways to trigger them. So you can use keyboard shortcuts. You can use on the Mac, you can use toolbar icons and click those and have an action run. There's menus. You can run them externally, so you can trigger them with Keyboard Maestro or Hazel or shortcuts or all sorts of things. Or Alfred, anything really. I mean, you can run an OmniFocus automation with an Apple script, so that should probably be enough for anyone listening to get the sense that you could pretty much hook it into anything. And I guess the only thing the only kind of limitation that I've really hit up against reasonably frequently is that at the moment, at least, and I live in hope that this will change one day. And I know I've put this request to Ken and the Omni Group a couple of times, is that you can't automatically trigger a plugin based on, say, the completion of a task or something like that at the moment. So you have to work around that. But that's really the only, I guess, limitation that I've really hit up against with any kind of consistency. And there's ways to work around it. So
yeah, and the problem with that is if the plugin isn't necessarily malicious but ill-written, and it works on task completion, you could literally check off a task and it would just go through and delete your library or something. It's just, it's when you give it that kind of automation, you've really, a mistake can do a lot of damage. It's like making an Alfred rule where you change the and to an or, and then suddenly you've deleted like 1,000 files. Not that I've ever done that, but I mean,
I guess the counter to that would be, I mean, you could any plugin you run could do that. But I did see on the OmniFocus forums recently, someone was asking about this, and Ken, as per usual in typical Omni Group form, had replied with a very considered and detailed response of, well, here are some of the considerations about why that might be difficult and what we would need to think about, and what happens if you complete it on the Apple Watch, which can't run information, or what happens if your database gets out of sync, or all of these kinds of things. Yeah. So there's a lot of, I understand why it's not there, but it's the only thing that I've sort of hit against that people sometimes expect to be there that isn't. And as I said, there's ways to work around it. I just have one of my plugins is just a custom complete plugin that I just have assigned to a keyboard shortcut. So anytime I'm completing a task on my Mac, I just hit that keyboard shortcut now, and it basically acts that way.
The system kind of reminds me of the I don't know if you ever used Word Basic, but Microsoft used to have a basic programming language for Microsoft Word where it gave you access to most of the system controls. And so if you wanted Word to do a special thing, like I used to use it when I write a contract, and then go up and then set these headings, and then go ask me for details of fill-in form and, blah, blah, blah. It's like that, but for a task manager. So it really does give, the sky's the limit really with this stuff.
It does do all sorts of things, from manipulating tasks to moving tasks to changing tags to changing the way your windows are set up to opening new windows. Like you can call out to APIs on the internet. It can do pretty well anything. They've done a fabulous job.
That's the first time anyone has said word basic out loud in 20 years. I'm pretty sure.
You're probably right.
I'm sitting here listening. It gives me shortcuts vibes. Sometimes when you're working in shortcuts, you have something you want to do, and it's like the one trigger or the one bit of automation you really need or want for your workflow is missing. And like there's a whole ecosystem of people like hacking around the edges of shortcuts to make it do things that are not there from day one. But the obvious difference is that the Omni Group is much more responsive to its customers and can move much more quickly than the shortcuts team can within Apple. And as again, from the outside, it seems like this is something they're taking very seriously and continue to work on and improve at a pretty good clip.
Yeah, and this is different from shortcuts in some ways. Like I'd say that it is not as user friendly as shortcuts. Shortcuts is like a stackable action. It's real clear, and there still are OmniFocus shortcuts actions, but this is a little bit more programmy, right? Because you're doing JavaScript, but it gives you access to just about anything the app does. So it really is like creating your own shortcuts actions, which because you can fire these off with Apple Script, like there's a bunch of ways to make this happen via shortcuts. So like you could actually just run the JavaScript in shortcuts too. So I mean, it's really pretty cool. If you're a task manager nerd and you want to, make your app, work the way you work, this is something you should probably look at.
And I guess the other thing that I'd say is I think in kind of listening to people talk about this in, on various podcasts and things like that, and just in the forums, I think people are a little bit scared of Omni automation because, and I think even we just now have started this conversation by talking about JavaScript, but really if you actually want to use it, you don't need to know JavaScript at all. You just need to find, much like you would with shortcuts or a Keyword Maestro macro or anything like that, you just need to find someone who's already done what you want to do and install it and go from there. Basically, it doesn't require a lot of technical knowledge to or any technical knowledge really to run or use them. To build them does, yeah, sure, but making use of them, absolutely not. It's not I need to dedicate a week to learning how to use Omni automation. Like, give yourself an hour and dig around and see what you can find and play around with it. It's not as scary as I think it seems to a lot of people.
Yeah, and this is where you just use other people's work. Like I went to Sal's website. I'm looking right now. The 15 or so I've got, 12 of them are wholeheartedly taken from Sal Segoyan, and then like one is from Kaitlin. Then there's like 2 or 3 more that I either wrote myself or I took somebody's and I modified it. But most of them, I didn't even modify them because, they did the thing I want. Like I wanted one that would take everything that was on a deferred list and just make the deferred date today. And I asked Sal about it. And like the next day he sent me the script and then put it on his website. So like, I didn't modify that. I just installed it and started using it. And that's basically what I'm doing with most of these. But how hard is this? I mean, if somebody does, there's we have some very smart listeners who are programmers or are programming adjacent. How hard is this to get into?
It's not, well, it's not as easy, I think, as you already alluded to. It's not as easy as something like shortcuts or Keyword Maestro because it doesn't have that visual editor. Like it is coding, it is programming. So it's not as easy to pick up as something like that. But that said, I don't think it's impossible. I mean, you're not a developer, David. I know, and you've just said that you've written a couple. So,
yeah.
I mean, you're pretty switched on. But I mean, I to give you some sense, I had a little bit of JavaScript knowledge when I started. I'd done a course through Free Code Camp, which is a really great resource for learning JavaScript, although it's more aimed towards learning web development, which is largely JavaScript based. So I had a little bit of JavaScript knowledge from that and doing some projects through there. But I hadn't, although I'm studying a Bachelor of Computer Science now, I hadn't started that at the time. I hadn't taken any formal kind of course before when I started writing my OmniFocus plugins, and that's probably apparent to anyone who's actually a real developer that looks at any of my code. They probably shudder if they pay too close attention, but as long as it sort of works, hopefully that's okay. But at the same time, I'd say if you want to do something really complex, yeah, it might be complicated, but really if you wanted to do something like what you're describing, David, of resetting a defer date, it's not really super hard. And I think the other thing about it is that there's such a good community around it. I mean, as you say, if you post in the OmniFocus Slack or on their forum, usually there's someone around that's able to help you learn, or even just able to write the thing for you, because it's actually 3 lines of code in the end. So I don't think it's impossible to get started with, but I would definitely say, as you've already said, I mean, the resources that Sal's already put out, and that Rosemary Orchard's got some plugins out there, and I've got a couple up on my website as well. Tim Stringer, I think, has got a directory at Learn OmniFocus as well of various plugins. So there's plenty out there already that you may just find that what you want to do has already been done. So don't recreate the wheel, is what I'd say.
Yeah, and literally you double click it and it's installed. I mean,
done.
Anybody listening to this can install these pre-existing workflows and scripts.
That's right. Yeah. You tapped more buttons to play this podcast than you will to install an OmniFocus plugin.
Yeah.
So.
Like, for instance, there was one I use because I use OmniFocus, and I do use defer dates on some, but not all of my tasks. But I had written very complicated Apple scripts myself years ago to move defer dates, and these were very hacky Apple scripts. And then somebody just wrote a JavaScript plugin that does all of that. Move defer dates, move due dates, make them all today. And then the plugin lets you attach keyboard shortcuts to that. It removed like a ton of bad Apple script from my system with one plugin. And that's the thing. I mean, and let's get into that. Kaitlin, you have put several out there. Tell us some of the features you've added to OmniFocus with the plugins you've written.
Oh, it's a bit hard to know where to start because I've gone a little bit over.
Let's start with task dependency, because that's what got you into it to begin with, and that's a really cool one.
So basically the idea behind that plugin, obviously for OmniFocus users, they will probably already know that OmniFocus has pretty good built-in support for managing I guess the sequence that tasks have to be completed in. So you can have sequential projects that you have to complete in order, or you can have parallel projects that you can complete all the tasks at the same time. And then you can nest action groups within those that themselves are sequential or parallel. So you can get quite complex in terms of the order with which you want to complete tasks. But the limitation that I hit up against with that was a lot of it was when I was studying, and I wanted to have, say, dependencies between projects. So, for example, I would have all my coursework in one project in OmniFocus, but I would have the assignment as a separate project because I wanted to keep a close eye on it and make sure I didn't miss an assignment that was, buried in a list of 300 bits of coursework. But you can't, obviously, in OmniFocus, as it's built, have that dependency between tasks where you might want to complete up to the week 3 of content before you start assignment 1 because it requires you to know that information to do it. So that, and just more complex, I guess, connections between tasks where I had very specific orders about when I wanted to complete things. I wanted to watch all the lectures in order, and I wanted to do all the exercises in order, but I didn't want to do the exercise that related to the lectures until I'd watched the lecture. So it became quite difficult to manage with the built-in system. So what I basically built was a plugin that allows you to, again, I trigger it using a keyboard shortcut that says, this task is a prerequisite, this task is a dependent, and then it basically applies a tag to the dependent task, which is set to on hold. And so until that first task is marked complete, that second task is unavailable, basically.
And you're
Hopefully that
just using
explanation made some sense.
no, but I mean, and kind of the mechanics of this, I mean, is that because you can program tags and then set rules based on tags, that's kind of the underlying logic of it, which I think anybody can understand, right? You know, you just applying tags and then using that to show you new tasks. And but
yeah,
it's clever and it adds a feature to the application. I think that's exactly what they intended with it. And I think it's really commendable that you put that together. That wasn't an easy automation to write. Like the stuff I do is very basic, but this one has got, contingencies in it.
yeah, it was a big project, and it's probably one that I mentioned before about I'm almost ashamed to have anyone that actually knows what they're doing look at it, and I know it's one that I probably need to go back and look at because it was the very first one I did, and I know because I've gone back and tried to fix various bugs and things over the time that it's not nicely written, but it does seem to mostly work. It sounds quite. I don't know that I explained it particularly well, and it sounds quite complex to explain verbally, but it's in practice it's quite simple. And if I can, I'll just do a shout out. I did do a interview with Tim Stringer over at Learn OmniFocus as well, which has where I demonstrated that plugin. And a bunch of others. And I think if anyone is really interested in watching some of that, it's probably a little bit easier to watch it on a screen and see it in action. And that's probably the best place to go to get a bit of a little taste of how that works and join us in the rabbit hole that is Omni Automation.
Yeah. We'll put a link into that. We had Tim on recently too, so we've been hitting that. What are some of your whether you wrote them or not? What are some of your other favorite plugins that you've been using with the application?
I've got a few that I use all the time. Some of them are really simple. So, like, I've got some that will just open the URL that's in a note, which I use all the time. And that's not limited to just web URLs. So that will often take me to another OmniFocus perspective or back to an email from someone or something like that. I use that all the time. I've just got that attached to a keyboard shortcut. I've got another one that I use all the time is a plugin that I use to defer tags. So tags in OmniFocus, unlike projects or tasks, aren't able to be deferred until a certain date. But quite often I find that I've got a series of tasks that are all tagged with the same thing, but I don't have access, and the thing that they're tagged with is reflective of some kind of resource that I need to complete the task. So a person or a place I need to be in or a piece of equipment that I need to have, but I don't have access to that, whatever that might be at the time for, say, I know I'm not going to have access to it until 5 o'clock. So I have a plugin that effectively defers that tag until 5 o'clock, puts it on hold, and then at 5 o'clock, I've got Keyboard Maestro running in the background, and it runs a script, and at 5 o'clock it goes, oh, it's time to make that tag available again, and it does. And I use that quite often. I also have it set up for some recurring things, so like store opening hours and things like that, which is kind of fun.
It's interesting how important Keyboard Maestro is to these types of automations when you get when you go down the rabbit hole, because Keyboard Maestro, the triggers are so extensive. Like you could say, like when I plug in my scanner, then enable the perspective that shows me scannable items, and you can do that through tags. It's really I think Keyboard Maestro is a great piece of this if you're going to go down.
Yeah, it's fundamental, and it runs so many of the plugins that I have written, it runs in the background. I've also got templates plugin, which I probably should give a shout out because it's been quite popular, and I know that it's one that that Tim's played before because I know he uses it. So that's quite useful. That's certainly driven by, similar to other scripts that people before me have written. I think Kurt Clifton had written one that it's largely based on, and I actually got an email from him at one point, which was really nice. And it was complimentary rather than, oh my goodness, why have you stolen all my work? So that was nice. And the other one that I use all the time is what I call a scheduling plugin. So again, that's one that goes back to what you were saying, David, of using Keyboard Maestro in the background as a support. So I guess what that does is it adds what I call a due date to my tasks. So that's when I actually intend to do the task, as opposed to the defer date, which is when I am able to start it, or the due date, which is when it has to be done by. It basically uses a kind of complicated system of tags to say, I'm going to do this on Wednesday. And with the new OmniFocus 4, I've just been playing with the option of adding a scheduled notification, which now makes it pop into the forecast in OmniFocus. So it shows in that kind of day view of what you've got on for the day, which has been really nice, because you can sort of see it alongside all of the due tasks and things as well. So, I mean, there's plenty more, but that's probably enough to give you a sense of the kinds of things that I've been playing with.
Yeah, and you are actually, for people interested in really digging deep on Omni automation, you are starting a course called Supercharge OmniFocus. You can find it over at KaitlinSalzke.com. And Kaitlin has this course she's developing, which is all about these plugins, how to build them, how to install them, how to use them. I'd recommend anybody that wants to really go into this, check it out. We'll put a link in the show notes for it.
Yeah, I will just add a little disclaimer to that, which is to say that I got a little bit overexcited when I put that link on my website, because I hadn't actually built any part of that course yet, and I thought I'll just set up the page and I'll get it all ready to go. And I quietly added the link, and then, much to my surprise, people started sending me money for it. And that was a bit of a shock, because I wasn't really prepared. And then I had all the intentions in the world of having it all up, and I'm not. It's not the production standard, I will say, is not going to be equivalent to, say, a Mac Sparky field guide. We'll just put that disclaimer out there now. but my intention was to have a lot of it done in the last quarter of last year, and to finish it all off this year. And then my son started daycare, and so we've had about 3 months of plague in our house, so that hasn't quite gone to plan, but it is happening. It's happening slowly. You are able to buy it now, but it's not all there currently, so it'll be added to gradually. And my, I guess, overriding aim with that is it's not a course I'm selling to make money. It's not really a profit making exercise at all. It's really just that I wanted to have an option for people that wanted, I guess, someone to sit through and watch just visually how some of these plugins work. So what I'm aiming to do is make all of the basic stuff that you actually need to get started, like how to actually install the plugin, which, as you say, is not very complicated. It's really just a matter of double clicking on the file. But all of that stuff I want to make should be freely available. And it's just, if you want to pay a little bit extra to help support the costs of, the software to record the things and the hosting of the course and all of that sort of stuff, then you can get that extra of actually running through a whole bunch of plugins. I think I've got about 30 or something that I've got set up that I want to go through and just run through how they work and how they're designed to work, because some of them, in me trying to talk through them here, it's probably quite apparent that they don't necessarily, without that visual of what's actually going on, it can be a bit hard to convey, I think, sometimes how they work. And I think sending someone to a GitHub repository with all the technical information as well can be a bit overwhelming. So that's all that's kind of intended to do, but it will come.
It's great, and I encourage people to check it out. And I can tell you, I wrote books. That was how I started doing the educational Mac stuff, and I do videos now. And people ask me, why don't you write books? Well, because it's so much easier to teach you stuff when you can look over my shoulder. And,
right.
You are right on track here.
This episode of MPU is made possible by ZocDoc. If you've ever stewed over a health problem you have, you know the temptation to text a pal or even a whole group chat to get your friends' opinions. Chances are, you're extremely unlikely to find qualified medical advice in that group chat. But you can find it from a doctor on ZocDoc. Thousands of medical professionals on ZocDoc are there to help you. They listen like a friend and give you the expert care you need. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, are available when you need them, and treat almost any condition under the sun. Switching doctors is a pain. I did it a few years ago, and I finally found someone who really worked for me, but it took a long time. And with ZocDoc, you can speed up that process and get in to see somebody much sooner. There's no more doctor roulette or scouring the internet for questionable reviews. With ZocDoc, you have a trusted guide to connect you to your favorite doctor you haven't met yet. Millions of people use ZocDoc's free app to find and book an appointment right in their neighborhood. A doctor who is patient reviewed, fits their needs and their schedule. So go to ZocDoc.com/MPU to download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc, ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/MPU.
Kaitlin, we have been talking about OmniFocus, but you actually use other productivity apps too. I thought it'd be fun to go through some of them. We tipped our hand a little bit in the last segment. Let's talk about Keyboard Maestro. I think you're pretty invested in that app.
Yes and no. I mean, I use it all the time and I completely rely on it. But in actually looking at how much I use it for, I don't have a lot of macros in there. They're just really important ones. So it does a lot of OmniFocus stuff in the background for me, which we've talked about at length already, I think. It does a little bit of window management, not a lot because I just haven't spent the time in refining how I actually want my windows to be set up. I've got some OmniFocus setups specifically, which I run. I use Alfred to trigger those, and I have like 6 OmniFocus windows at once tiled on my screen. But I haven't really set it up to do much else in terms of window management. But that's probably something I'll use it for more in the future. One that I never use until I need it, but when I need it, I'm always grateful for it, and I'm sure I stole it from someone else, is I just have a macro that speaks to me, that makes my computer talk when the internet comes back online. So every so often when the internet goes down, instead of sitting there sort of refreshing the page or looking at the status monitor in my menu bar for an hour until it comes back online, that's an exaggeration. Feels like an hour sometimes though. I just have my computer yell at me across the room, so that's always a little bit of nerdy fun. And then I also have, just having a look through here, my partner, as I think I mentioned before, is a professional musician, and he also does some composition and arranging, and he has published a bunch of his arrangements and things for other teachers mostly to use on a website that we set up years and years ago. And so I've got a few macros in there that help me with that kind of workflow as well. Something that I found, we package them usually as zip files, but because they're generated on a Mac, they have all that extra Mac stuff in the zip file. So I just have a little macro that zips the files and gets rid of that extra bit of, the extra, it's like a Mac OS folder or something like that. I can't even remember now.
It's like the resource fork stuff.
All that stuff. So we just nuke that basically. And one as well that will just generate a sample page. So we'll, take the page that's open in preview and stick a watermark on it and save it in the folder. So all of that kind of thing. I don't use it anywhere near to its full potential, I know, but that's kind of the bulk of what I'm using it for, really. I did use someone, again, I think in the Mac Power Users Forum, or maybe it was Automators, shared a bunch of Keyboard Maestro's macros to help with managing spaces on Mac as well, which I was using for a little while. I've kind of gotten out of the habit of that just because I'm sitting in front of my Mac less and less as I'm chasing a toddler around more and more, I'm finding. But I was using those a bit as well, just to manage spaces on my Mac.
Where do you draw the line between Keyboard Maestro and shortcuts? Because that's a question a lot of people have. As shortcuts gets better, how much can they do in shortcuts versus what they do in Keyboard Maestro?
I don't really have a good rule, and I think it's blurrier now too with shortcuts being on the Mac, although I must confess I haven't, again, spent as much time as I would like with shortcuts on the Mac. The couple of times I've tried to, it's been a little bit buggy for me, so I haven't really been heartened to continue down that path. I think it more depends. If it's something I want to run on my phone, I'll tend to use shortcuts. And if I only want to run it on my phone, actually it doesn't matter anymore. But if it's something, I think most of the stuff I'm doing with Keyboard Maestro, to be honest, is either something I specifically want to do on my Mac, in terms of, moving windows around or something, which I think you can do that in shortcuts now too, actually, but it's just not where it started, so that's not happened that way. Or it's often something that I actually want to happen in the background with regularity. And although in theory I could do that with shortcuts on my phone, and I've certainly tried to set up some OmniFocus automations in the background that run on a schedule on my phone, I haven't had a lot of success with that. I get a lot of error messages from shortcuts.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I do think that like time delayed automation is better in Keyboard Maestro and more reliable, where shortcuts is really good at like putting together pre-built actions and running them in the moment. Mm-hmm. It's good at that.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction. Kaitlin, do you have a preferred method of firing off these macros in Keyboard Maestro? I know David and I are both affectionate Stream Deck users. Are you a keyboard shortcut person? How do you go about that?
I am a little bit of a keyboard shortcut person. I have a bit of a mix. Obviously, as we said, a lot of it runs in the background automatically, but the stuff that doesn't, some of the little stuff that I use all the time that's more like quality of life stuff. Like I have one to automatically maximize a window, and for example, I keep going back to OmniFocus. I want to stop talking about OmniFocus, but if that maximize shortcut, if I'm in OmniFocus, will automatically maximize all the toolbars and menus and stuff as well. So that kind of thing that I want to be under my fingers, I'll definitely use a keyboard shortcut. But for stuff that I use less frequently, I tend not to remember the keyboard shortcut, and then I forget what it is, and then I have to look it up. So if it's something I use really infrequently, sometimes I use the Keyboard Maestro menu bar, just the list, where I can just look at the list and click what I want. But the other thing that I run a couple using Alfred as well. So I have Alfred as my, launcher app. So I think it's Command Space, and that pops up, and I use that for. Again, it's one I probably don't use to its full capacity, but I use it for finding files, doing various file-y things, and opening apps, and also for launching particularly setups and things like that. I try and launch that way. I do also have the keyboard. I can't remember how I set it up. I'm sure it's a built-in Keyboard Maestro action, which just allows you to search for Keyboard Maestro macros by name.
That's an action. Yeah,
that's an action. Yeah. So I've got that set up, and so for anything that I use infrequently that I know is in Keyboard Maestro, but I don't use it often enough to have bothered to set it up in Alfred, I have that as a keyboard shortcut that I can access as well. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's not terribly consistent, but it sort of depends on what it is and what's going to work for me for that action, I guess.
I know you're also a Better Touch Tool user, and that app in particular, there's a lot of ways you can use Better Touch Tool. How are you using Better Touch Tool?
I am pretty well limited to using it, and I know it can do so much more than what I'm doing, which seems to be a consistent refrain for today for me, sorry. But I'm basically using it. They recently, it was probably in the last couple of years, added the ability to set up the hyperkey shortcut in Better Touch Tool, which I'd previously experimented with trying to use. I think it was Carabiner or something that you used to have to use to set that up, and I never quite committed to the process, and I never quite got there. But when they added it to Better Touch Tool, which I already had because it's part of Setup, I jumped on that and I've been using that. So a lot of the keyboard shortcuts that I do have tend to use that caps lock hyperkey.
So for folks who aren't familiar with that, it's basically, there's a keyboard shortcut that a lot of people like. It's Control Option Command Shift. So it's 4 buttons, and that's never taken by built-in apps. Nobody writes a shortcut with 4 modifiers. And then what people do is and I think Brett Terpstra, if he wasn't the person who came up with the term, he was the first person who I heard it from. He takes the caps lock and remaps it. So when you press caps lock, instead of locking caps, it press Shift Control Option Command. So it's one button that gets basically 4 modifiers, and it's kind of like the holy grail of modifiers because it's not taken by any other apps, and you can use it to do like cool stuff. Like for me, the caps lock plus the M is like the Mac Sparky setup key, and I just jump into Mac Sparky with it. It's like, I don't know, Kaitlin, if you experience this, but like I have this like thing in my brain where is this shortcut or is this automation, is it hyper key worthy? It's like I only want to give the very best stuff to the hyper key, because those are like the easiest to press. Do you do that too? You like struggle?
Yeah, I'm pretty frugal in doling out keyboard shortcuts a little bit anyway. But pretty much if I'm setting up a keyboard shortcut, I'll tend to use that. I do have some set up that are just in OmniFocus that have just the Option key, and I try and use that for ones that I can. But pretty well anything else is using that caps lock key because it's just easy to remember then.
Yeah, and another way around this, if you're listening, then you have too many, is in Keyboard Maestro, you can map shortcut keys per application. So say if I'm in OmniFocus, Control O does this, but if I'm in Mail, Control O does that. And that's a nice way to get around that limitation. But really, the hyper key is where it's at, man. And Better Touch Tool is the way to do it. I was just looking the other day. I fell down an 1.5-hour rabbit hole. Better Touch Tool is adding a way to rebuild your menu bar and put like data in it. And I realized that like I lost an 1.5 hours just fiddling with it. And I'm like, you got to like step out. You got to like step back, buddy, and just like get back, So yeah, Better Touch Tool is always giving me diversions.
Yeah, I think I did also have it. I say I just used it for the hyperkey, but I think I may have also at one point had it set up, and I'm not sure whether I still do, it has some options there to change how the like the close and the minimize and maximize buttons work. Like I think I might have used it to change. I'll have to go in and have a look. This is the thing, all the really useful stuff you use, you forget that you've actually set up until it breaks. But I'm pretty sure that I use that to remap the full screen button to not actually go full screen, but just to maximize, which I prefer. But there's definitely some options in there as well. I mean, there's so much that Better Touch Tool can do, and I put it on the list because I think it deserves to be plugged, even though I'm not using it anywhere near its full capacity.
Yeah, Stephen and I did a whole episode on Better Touch Tool back in April of 2020, and it may be time. They've added so much. We'll have to talk about this, Stephen, because this app is continuing to excel. This is an example of an app where the developer turned it into his day job, and the users really got a boon as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really making it difficult. I think it's really not fair because there's so many choices now when you want to do automation or anything like this that you have to really think about where you want to put it. There's so many choices now, which I guess is a nice problem to have.
Yeah. There's literally an abundance of riches for Mac automation. And the thing that's happened this year, I guess we're late 2022 into early 2023, is suddenly they've all learned to talk to each other. So Apple scripts, talk to JavaScripts, talk to Hazel rules, talk to Better Touch Tool, talk to shortcuts, talks to Keyboard Maestro. So it's like you can, as you learn the tools, it's like a carpenter with a bunch of different chisels and whatnot on his belt. You can really pick the one that's best for each little thing and just glue them together. It's a great time to automate on the Mac. You also are a bartender user.
I am, yeah. And again, it's one that sits there and until you turn on your Mac and it hasn't loaded yet, you sort of forget that you've got it installed. But it just, like any good Mac Power user listener, I've got what feels like hundreds of little app icons sitting in my menu bar if I don't do anything about it. And it just keeps them all nice and tidy and restricted to the few that I actually want to see on a day-to-day basis. And there's only so much room across the top of a Mac, and it helps me to not fill it all up.
Yeah, I mean, especially on a notebook, and I know you're using the M1 Air, but the current crop of machines, the M2 Air and the new MacBook Pros have that notch, right? So like your menu bar items slam into the notch, and then you don't, what's hiding back there, and so Bartender definitely, and there's other apps like it. I think Vanilla is another popular one, but I agree with you. Like totally critical on my notebook. Now at my desk with a big 27-inch display, I don't care. Like go wild. But if you're a notebook first user, and most Mac users are by definition, like if you're not using Bartender or something like it, I just don't know what to tell you. You got to get on it.
It's not like it's some of these other apps either that will take you out, that will lead you down that rabbit hole that David just went on with Better Touch Tool either. It's you set it up and you're probably done in 10 minutes configuring it exactly the way you want it. So it's low hanging fruit in that respect.
It also does a better job of remembering the location of menu bar widgets than the native Mac operating system does. But I have this thing where I cannot convince the Mac operating system to keep my calendar to the right on my menu bar. It always, slides it over. It's like it doesn't want to hold on to it in the locations I want them. Do you guys experience that? I've been researching it, trying to figure a way what's going on here, but lately it's like, I'm just going to scramble these every time you go, so your brain will have no idea where to look.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
No, I don't have that problem. I want to give a shout out to one little menu bar app that I do have, just looking at my menu bar here, which is called Spaceman. So basically what it does, and it's one that it's just really handy in orienting yourself if you're using spaces. So it has basically little squares that represent your screens and shows you which current space you're in for each of your, if you have multiple monitors, it's got two little sets of them. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's just a really neat little utility if you're trying to use spaces and get your head around where you are on your Mac.
Yeah, I solved that problem with background colors, like the wallpaper colors. Like comms for me is one color and production is another color, and so it's like I know exactly where I am by the color of the screen. But that would work too.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're a bit more organized than me, but mine are a little bit more ad hoc than that.
Yeah, organized is one word for it, but some people will say it's other words.
We'll stick with organized.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com/MPU and make your next move. Enter offer code MPU at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. If you want to build a website, Squarespace is the place you go. Looking back, so many of the major moves I've made in my life started with building a Squarespace website. MacSparky was a Squarespace website. My law practice was. My kids, as they've grown up and done things in the world, they've built Squarespace websites. It's just the place we go to start to make change. And with Squarespace, it's so easy. You can stand out with a beautiful website, engage your audience, and sell anything, your products, services, or even the content you create on a Squarespace website. They've just got you covered all the way around. Now, selling products in an online store can be daunting, but not with Squarespace. Whether you sell physical or digital goods, Squarespace has the tools you need to start selling online. And the problem with home-built websites is that they're so ugly, but that's not true. Squarespace has best-in-class templates to customize that you can really make fit your needs. It's as easy as browsing the category of your business to find the perfect starting place, and then you customize it with just a few clicks. And if SEO is intimidating to you, it doesn't need to be. You can use the built-in suite of integrated features and useful guides that help maximize prominence among search results. Squarespace has been with me as I built out MacSparky and as I did my law practice, and it can be with you too. So head over to squarespace.com/MPU for a free trial with no credit card required. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code MPU to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/MPU. And when you decide to sign up, use that offer code MPU to get that 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
So, Kaitlin, you're a big Mac user. big iOS user, but you also are a PC user. And you mentioned earlier that you've got a personal phone and a work phone. And a lot of MPU listeners out there are living that exact life, right? They have their Apple set up at home, but out in the world, you've got to conform to whatever your employer or school or whatever kind of forces onto your desk. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that, especially as somebody who is so centered around OmniFocus, what your solutions are.
I don't know that I can say that I have any solutions at this stage. So I started this new job, and the previous job was Windows based as well. But the current job that I started, I think I moved here in May of last year. So you'd think I'd have it figured out by now, but I still don't quite. I've been experimenting with all sorts of different things. I was playing around with using Jump Desktop to kind of remote back into my Mac from the office and use OmniFocus that way. I played around with trying to use OmniFocus for the web, but that doesn't have automation. So that, for me, as you can imagine, was a bit of a non-starter. I've tried just running my OmniFocus database predominantly on my I have a separate OmniFocus database for work, just in a separate user account on my Mac. So I've tried just kind of managing that in the evening after I get home when I'm sort of getting ready for the next day, and then using my phone to kind of refer to during the day. I've tried using kind of like a bullet journal style approach, and I haven't really landed on anything yet. And the other thing that I think we mentioned earlier was that I was looking at potentially maybe just taking the iPad in and trying to use that, especially now that I think the keyboard support and in OmniFocus itself is improving, and the the mouse support and stuff is pretty good on iPad now as well. So I don't have answers, but I think I'm getting there. I think David Allen in Getting Things Done, when we're talking about OmniFocus specifically, he said something. He wrote something about I can't quote it exactly, but it was something about the more mundane tasks being the most complex to handle. So I feel like my sort of personal life does require a more complex OmniFocus setup than my work does, and a lot more interaction in how I kind of manage it. As far as everything else goes, where I'm just using Outlook on the Windows computer at work. I have just Mail set up on my work phone, but I try not to work too much from home. I try and have a pretty clear distinction between work and home where I can. So I'm playing with a few things. When we were scheduling this conversation, David sent me a link to one of the the proposals
Right.
from Fantastical, and I went, oh, that I might need that. So I think I'm in this new year, and we're recording this on the 18th of January, and I've managed with a series of plagues that have hit my house, thanks to my toddler starting daycare. I've managed to be in the office for a grand total of about 4 hours so far this year. So I haven't gotten very far with any of these projects, but I think I'm going to start looking at Fantastical to start using some of those proposals and openings features. I don't have an executive assistant or an admin assistant at work, so that's all my calendar and things I manage myself, which is fine. I don't feel like I need to pay someone to do that. With the volume of meetings and things that I have, I don't think it's worth doing. But anything that can make it easier for me to do, I'll do. I don't love that backwards and forwards of I'm free this time and this time and this time, and when are those suits you? I can do any time on Thursday, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw that from David for scheduling this, I thought, well, that's going to change. I'm going to have to jump to Fantastical. I think I've been using BusyCal on the Mac and the iPhone for quite a long time, just because it comes with SetApp and it does 99% of what I want to do, but I don't think it quite does that. So I think I'm going to make that jump.
All right, let me go back. There's a couple things I want to talk about because no, I did the same thing. I was in an office using a PC and there was no choice, and I did the jump desktop into the Mac, and I tried a bunch of things for task management in particular. As like you, a day one OmniFocus user, I found that an iPad in the office was perfect, and this was before OmniFocus is where it is now. This is back in the days where you would email yourself tasks and things. And I think you should really try that, especially if that iPad is just collecting dust. I think you may find a lot of uses for it next to your
Yeah.
PC.
I think that's going to be the answer. I think I'd
Yeah.
resisted it because I had at one stage promised the iPad to my partner.
Okay.
And said
All
it was
right.
going to be his. So, but
Yeah.
he hasn't really picked up on that. So I think I'm reclaiming it, and I think that'll be the next.
Yeah. I can't
next
get. I'm not going to
iteration.
give advice on relationship politics. That's not. That's beyond the scope here. But the other thing you might want to try that you haven't, and I think this would make perfect sense, especially the way you describe your job, is to just bottle them in Outlook. Just treat work as a Outlook bottle, and every project you do at work is managed with the Outlook task system, which is not terrible. And just say OmniFocus is not work, and that might be a good solution for you. I would try those two and see what works for you.
That's sort of what I did in my previous job. I kept trying to make OmniFocus work for my previous job, which was a lot more because it was tax and financial statements and things like that. It was a lot more compliance based and a lot more not transactional exactly, but a lot more routine. So basically, if you had a job in front of you, you knew what the next thing you had to do was. But I think I found in this new job the projects are a lot more varied in nature and a lot bigger. So I don't think that's going to quite cut it here. I think the iPad's going to be the answer ultimately, but I haven't settled on that just
That's
yet.
kind of fun though to work those things out. Kind of figure out what works. And then, like, if you go down the road of using something like Fantastical, that's all the more reason to have the iPad there because they've got a great app on iPad.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of my job probably can be done on an iPad. Really, if I stop and think about it, a lot of it's writing reports and sending emails, and there's although our accounting system probably I can't run on the iPad, I'm probably at a level now where I'm not actually the one that's interacting with that system on a daily basis. So I think there's definitely possibility there. I need to actually physically get back in the office and get the time to play around with some of this stuff.
We also have had people, and I did this as well, is where they just bring a Mac laptop and they can put a switch on where they can connect their work screen to the Mac or the PC, and then you can sit there and do the work on the Mac that makes sense, and you can switch over to the PC. Like if you got proprietary software or something that's not on your Mac, you can do that on the PC, but do everything else on the Mac, because with Microsoft Office, Google Docs, all these apps are platform agnostic. You can actually do quite a bit if you prefer to be on the Mac operating system. And I remember at one point, one of the partners in my firm's like, well, why are you doing that? It seems like like almost like I was doing something wrong. I'm like, well,
Right.
I work faster on this,
Yeah.
You pay me to produce, I produce faster. And then he's like, oh, okay. And then that was the end of it, I think you got a lot of options there. Is there any Windows software that has impressed you? Stuff you're like, hey, I wish we had this on the Mac.
Oh,
Did you hear that response?
I did hear that.
Don't even get me started on the accounting, the ERP we use. It's I can't even. I have been playing around a little bit, and this is probably something for potentially if anyone's running a small business or maybe even like a nonprofit or something like that, and wants to get and this is my accountant brain talking, and is interested in getting a really good grasp on their cash flow. I've been using an app called Castaway, and it's not super cheap. I think it's I'm trying to remember. I think our license is about $1,000 Australian dollars a year. But it's a business app, not a personal app. But what it does is cash flow forecasting. So it will it will let you set up a whole bunch of really complex parameters if you want to, around your income and expenses, and when they fall due, and how long you have to pay your invoices, and when your investments pay interest, and when you've got to pay all your creditors and things like that. And it will generate like a 3-way forecast, so your income and your expenses and your balance sheet and your cash flow statements. It's really quite an impressive in terms of what it can do. I think it's only on Windows, although I think they mentioned to me they were talking about moving to a cloud base, so potentially something that might be open to Mac users in the future, although don't quote me on that. But their support is absolutely amazing. It's a bit reminiscent of the Omni Group, actually. And they always get back to you with super detailed, helpful responses, which again I could contrast with other software that we are currently using, where I've heard of support times.
I have to giggle a little bit because like the one that you said is recommendable is software to run accounting. It's not like it's there's no whimsy on the PC still.
No. It's all work and no fun.
All business. And for folks listening, 1,000 Australian dollars is about $700 US.
So we like to wrap up these interview shows with some favorites, some apps or services or utilities that we haven't gotten to mention quite yet. And the listener can't see this, but you have a list of about 1 billion things in here. So I'm gonna say let's pick maybe the top 4 or 5 that we haven't mentioned yet.
Righto, I'm going to like really rapidly look through this list and then try and pick my top. So I'll try and pick some that I know. There's lots on here. There's lots on this list that we've probably that I know have been mentioned on Mac Power Users plenty of times before. So I'll try and skip those ones. One that I discovered in the last probably in the last year, and I'm not totally sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the app's called Typora or something like that. And what I've found that really great for is particularly for uni assignments and things like that. It's basically a markdown editor. It's quite a simple markdown editor, but what it does really well is letting you insert code snippets or bits of math within the document, which is something that you can do in other ways. Like you can do it in a Word document, but it's messy, or you can go like full LaTeX, which is, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly either. but this just lets you do it inline, much more markdown style, sort of presents it nicely visually, so you're not looking at a mess of just type that doesn't mean anything. So I'd highly recommend that one. I think I can't remember how much I paid for it. It was like $10 or something, and I'm super cheap and I paid it instantly after I did the trial. So if that's something that people have a need for, I'd highly recommend it. Just looking through my list here. Something that I haven't heard people talk about as much as I would have expected potentially, and again, one that I've used quite a lot in my studies and in trying to learn Spanish and various other bits and pieces, is Anki, which is a flashcard program. I've been a bit negligent of my Anki database. They keep sending reminders saying, if you don't use this soon, I'm going to delete the deck. But I still want to plug it because it's so good, and particularly if anyone's studying and they're looking at that kind of thing, the kind of spaced repetition is, I think it's a really solid way of learning things. When I have used it in academics, I've done it's worked really well for me, and I've got really good results when I've stuck to it.
So does their email say, hey, when you're not getting your computer science degree or your full-time job or being a mom, you need to be here doing flashcards, something like that?
No, it's very polite. It just says, look, we noticed you haven't been on in a while. If you don't if you want to keep your deck, just log into the website or resync and we'll keep it there for you. So it's quite polite. It's not too mean. It probably could afford to be a little bit more, give me a bit more of a kick up the butt actually, but no, it's so good if you actually get stuck into it and you're a nerd and you like playing with this sort of thing, like setting up custom cards and different, I had mine set up when I was doing Spanish to do like automatic voice to text and things like that. It was super fun.
There's one on your list here that we've never talked about in the Mac Power Users, and I wasn't familiar about it. But tell us about Flying Logic.
So that's a new discovery for me, and I'm not. I don't think I've even paid for it yet, to be honest. But I've got the trial, and I'm really enjoying it. So I guess I'm probably not going to do it justice because I'm not an expert in it at all. But it's kind of like a tool for thinking, I guess, is the idea of it. And it comes a little bit from the theory of constraints methodology, which again I'm not really familiar with at all. So I'm by no means an expert on that, but it allows you to do a whole bunch of things, but to map out problems and potential projects, and it basically creates a logic diagram in the form of a flowchart. And again, I'm doing a very bad job of explaining this, and I'd recommend you go to their website for a much better explanation. They actually have a really good PDF guide when you sign up for the trial that sort of walks you through the kinds of diagrams that it can create. But I actually sat down with it from a work perspective and just tried to work through some of the I guess the issues that I saw that we were having, and trying to get to the first diagram that I was trying to create was basically exploring what the root causes of the problems that I was seeing were. So I was saying, well, we have issues X, Y, Z here. What's causing those? What's causing the causes? What's causing the causes? And working backwards and seeing how it all, drawing the connections between them and seeing how it was all connected. And actually just going through that exercise. I mean, you could do that on paper. You could probably do it in something like draw.io, which is another really good tool if you want to draw flowcharts and Venn diagrams and stuff like that, which I love to do.
Or even Freeform if you want. But I mean,
yeah, and I haven't played with Freeform yet, but yeah, that would be, or OmniGraffle, or any of these things. But this it takes away any of the. It's not super pretty, to be honest, but it takes away any of the considerations about layout or spacing or anything like that, and you can just put the ideas in, link the thoughts together, and it moves stuff around. And I think it's really interesting. And I think if you're trying to work through problems, or I guess it's kind of project planning light, I guess that initial stage of, well, this is where we are, this is where we need to get to, so what are the prerequisites for getting there, and what are the steps we actually need to take, and what order do they need to happen in? I'm really interested in it.
Decision tree software, like this is like my kryptonite. I could get lost in this stuff. I'm tempted to make one that say, what is the logic tree to Stephen Hackett buying an Apple Silicon Mac Pro when they get released? But I would just make it so everything lands on yes. Like, is it raining? No. Then he's going to buy a Mac Pro.
There's no need Stephen? For these personal attacks on a show that we host together. My friend.
I'm enabling you. This is enabling. You can share it with Mary. Say, look, there's a flow chart. I have no choice.
Okay. One that jumped out at me, and it's one that I like too. I don't know if we've mentioned, or if we haven't talked about it enough, is Just Watch, which is this really cool app and service that lets you basically you ask it, hey, where can I watch X? And it tells you, oh, it's on these services and it's free or it's paid. It's awesome.
It's really good because it just, you pick up all these recommendations from all over the place of what to watch, and you never get to them straight away, and then I found now I just dump them in there, and the great thing about it is you just tell it what services you've got access to, and it will tell you which things are available to watch to you right now. So it's one day it might all be a bit more unified, but at the moment we've got content everywhere. So it's really handy. I really like it.
I got one more for you, last one, and because I saw this and I'm like, what is this app? And I have now downloaded it, and I'm waiting for my kids to come back and we're going to play it together. Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's so much fun. So this is a game that I downloaded a few years ago now. And how do you explain it? It's basically like one one person. It's a game you play, I guess, in real life, and one person has control of the computer or I think they have it on iPhone now as well. I saw when I was putting the link in here, and their objective is basically to defuse a bomb, which has got all sorts of complicated knobs and dials and wires and codes you have to crack and all of this kind of stuff. Again, very, very nerdy. But the idea is that another group of people have the manual of how to defuse the bomb. So they can't see the screen and you can't see the manual. And you basically, it's a communication challenge, basically.
Yes. You print out the manual and then you give it to them. Yeah.
It's so much fun.
It looks like fun. I'm going to be playing this with my family soon.
Yeah, Mike Hurley and I played it, I think, on the first podcast-a-thon for St. Jude. And
we did?
I think we blew up, if I remember correctly.
You definitely do the first time. I think we haven't played it that much because you've got to get willing participants that have to be about as equally nerdy as you are. Like my mother in particular was not particularly keen on the pressure of reading the manual and trying to understand all the instructions and doing it on the spot. It is a little bit overwhelming. Much like the other game that I've got there, which is Space Team, which I don't know. Have you guys played that at all?
Yeah, I played that one too.
That's lots of fun as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my family is full of nerds, and we are going to be bomb defusing as soon as we can all get in the same room. I can't wait. That's a good one, gang. If you've got like a family, you want to do some fun stuff together. It's a way to use your technology in a fun way. But either way, yeah.
And not limited to Mac either. I don't think actually. If you wanted something fun on Windows because you can't find any other fun software, that one will do it for you.
There you go. Yeah, when you're not, getting your payable report.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Kaitlin, thank you so much for coming on. You are been such a great guest, and so happy to see the stuff you're sharing over at KaitlinSalzke.com. If you are an OmniFocus user, you owe it to yourself to go check out some of her scripts and learn more about scripting. If you want to get into supercharging OmniFocus, she's got a course called Supercharge OmniFocus. You can get it right there. And congratulations with everything, with the baby, the degree, and I can't wait to see what you make in the future.
Thanks very much for having me, guys. It's been lots of fun.
We want to thank our sponsors today. That's our friends at TextExpander, ZocDoc, and Squarespace. We are the Mac Power users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU, and we'll see you next time.